gentlemen, this is a perfect time to make sure all cell phones are turned off for the service.
Shalom, everyone. I am Cantor Marty Goldstein, and Rabbi Chai, our rabbi, is up there. He's in New York visiting his parents. But I'm so glad that you're all here to bring comfort to this beautiful family. I got a chance to really get to know Mort and Toby when Toby invited me to see their art in their home, which I had no idea what was in there. And I walked in and I was like, wow. I'm at the Metropolitan here. But really, it's their heart and soul that's the most important. I'd like to open with a beautiful Psalm 23, Mizmor LeDavid. This psalm is often associated with funerals, but we sing it on Shabbat at Mincha in the afternoon, and it's about rest. It's about finding peace. And we wish that Mort's journey is one of peace. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Rohi lo echsar, binodesh yarbitzeni al menuchot. Yenaleni nafshi shoev yancheni v'magle tzedek hoy leman shemo gam kielech begets al mavet lo ira ki ata imadi shivetecha umishanetecha hema Yenachamuni ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged soderai. Tishan tavashemen roshi kosi revaya achtav v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai v'shaveti beved Adonai leorech yamim. I direct you to Rabbi Chatavsky.
In this hour of sadness, let us hear the voice of the psalmist as he brings us the message of God's nearness, of our fellowship with God in light and in darkness, in life and in death. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul, guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The mysteries of life and death are beyond human understanding. We are perplexed and overwhelmed when pain and anguish befall those whom we love. In sorrow, confronted by death, which has taken Morton Mower from our midst, we feel our own frailty. Like morning dew, we glisten for an hour or two and disappear into a new day. Shepherd of Israel, guide us, your flock, with love and compassion. If in our grief and desolation we grow distant or stray from you, do not abandon us. Draw us closer to you. Grant solace and comfort to those who mourn. May they sustain each other with the blessing of memory. In the valley of the shadow of death, beside still waters and in green pastures, you, Adonai, are our shepherd. Be our strength and our shield, our guide, and may our comfort through all our days. And let us all say, Amen. I had arrived at my parents' home in Rockland County, New York, just 20 minutes before the call came that Mort had died. I was shocked. I was heartbroken. And I'm sorry that I cannot be there with Toby and the family in person at this very difficult time. Joining me today are two friends and colleagues who knew Mort in different ways. One, their shul rabbi from Baltimore, Rabbi Yerachmiel Shapiro of the Moses Montefiore Anshe Emunah congregation, and the other, Rabbi Stephen Foster, Rabbi Emeritus of Temple Emmanuel, and a leading member of the Rabbinic Cabinet for Makor at the Jewish National Fund, an organization very dear to Mort and to Toby, and we will hear from both of them very shortly. Mort's passing is not simply a loss for those nearest and dearest to him. His wife, Toby, his children, Robin and Mark, and his grandchildren, Mason, Luca, and Zeke, and his sister, Susan. It's not only a loss for the clinical and research medical communities in which he was so active and creative. It is not only a loss for the Jewish communities here and in Israel. It is truly a loss for the worldwide community. Mort was not only a true prince of our people, Mort was a prince for all people. His professional and personal reach extended further than that of almost any rabbi. His wisdom, his expertise, and his unceasing desire to help others are truly unquantifiable. But when I say that his reach was greater than almost any rabbi, I did have one exception in mind. Mort's middle name is Maimon, which connects him to the great Moses Maimonides, the Rambam, medieval rabbi, scholar, philosopher, theologian, and renowned medical doctor. He served the Jewish world. He served the secular world. He served the Islamic world. He served royalty. He served plain citizens. His work, simply put, made the world a better place. And I think we would all agree that Mort's accomplishments had a similar effect. The list of organizations and associations he was part of or supported would fill multiple pages of a resume. His wide-ranging interests spanned the worlds of medicine, science, art, and culture. Jewish tradition tells us that the great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai once asked his leading students, all of whom were great rabbis, to determine the best and most useful character trait that one should develop in this world. One suggested a good eye, or an eye for the good. Another offered, be a good friend. A third offered, be a good neighbor. And another suggested to always consider the potential outcomes of one's actions. And then the fifth suggestion was made, and that was to develop a good heart. Think about that for a moment. We can define good heart in many ways, and because it can mean many things, Rabbi Yochanan thought that this was the best answer, saying it encompassed all of the other suggestions. Mort was blessed with all of the traits listed above. He had a good eye, an eye for the good. He was a good friend. He was a good neighbor. And he would always consider the potential outcomes of his actions or inaction. He was also blessed with a great heart. He was essentially a modest, quiet man who had the ability to befriend and warmly embrace others readily and easily. When he came to shul and elsewhere on the street, he would greet you with a ready smile. And if you were lucky, or maybe not so lucky, he would greet you with a self-composed joke or pun that was calculated to elicit a laugh, but just as often would elicit a groan. He genuinely connected with people, and it was always a privilege to have his ear for stimulating an intelligent conversation. But more than that, he gave countless thousands from every corner of the world the ability to develop their own good heart through his tireless work and pioneering invention, the implantable defibrillator. It is no exaggeration to say that it changed the course of medical history and increased the prospects for better health and wellness for people everywhere, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Mort was diminutive in size, but in every way, a truly larger than life human being. He lived life on his own terms. He loved life. He was a skier. He even invented a boot to help skiers navigate particularly sharp turns. He was a tinkerer. He was curious. He wanted to make the immediate and the larger world a better place. He exemplified the notion of tikkun olam in a most obvious and literal way. All who came to know him were enriched by his presence, by his smile, by his knowledge, his wisdom, and his willingness to share, and his example of Emor Ma'at Va'aseh Harbe. Say little, but do a lot. He was a doer, and our world is poorer for his having passed away, even as it is richer for all of the contributions he made on so many levels, in so many areas, to so many people. May his soul ever rest in the bond of eternal life. Mort may be gone, but a piece of his spirit lies within each of us. We should cherish it, and we should fan its flame so that it continues to improve the life and lot of our world. May he rest in peace, and we should all say, Amen. I turn the program over now to my good friend, Rabbi Yerachmiel Shapiro. Please give him your attention.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Chai. When you lose someone who you love and care about, the feelings are very complex. There's sadness, and there's heartbreak. There's pain at the thought that you'll never be able to physically hold him again. And at the same time, there's pride. There's joy knowing that he lived a great life. There are good feelings as well. Jewish tradition has an old custom to honor all these feelings. It's called the tearing of Kriya. The mourners are wearing ribbons, and when they tear them, it will symbolize the brokenheartedness that they're feeling, the sadness. But as they tear the ribbons, they will also say a blessing. A blessing? They're going to thank God, because when you take life, you have to take it with everything it gives, all the wonderful moments and all the sad moments. And we thank God for everything. So please repeat after me. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Ha'olam Dayan Ha'emes. You can tear the ribbons now. I'm taking the bottom. It means, blessed are you, O God, creator of this beautiful world, who is true and righteous even in these moments of judgment. I want you each to know that your presence here today, including those who are here on live stream, is an honor to Mort and an honor to his family. His neshama, his soul, is present here. We should, in our mind's eye, picture it like he's sitting on a beautiful chair, and he's smiling at each of us, so grateful that you're here to honor him. And we're told that sharing words of love, recollections, thoughts, it gives comfort, nachas ruach, to his soul. And so, to honor him with words, I invite his beloved daughter, Robin.
Okay, I do have to say my heart's pounding, so. Mort, Morton, Morty, Mort the sporty dad. I'm so incredibly proud to be his daughter. He is my hero, and I can't even begin to tell you what he has taught me in life, but I will try and share a few with some stories and his famous quotes. One of the most important things Dad has taught me is the value of education and books. Dad strongly believed that education and books are never a wasted investment. He told my brother and I that we could do anything we wanted to do once we got the highest degree in our field. Mark and I did just that. I got my doctorate in pharmacy and went to do a residency in hematology and oncology and have worked in the field since. Mark took a little more literally and got a law degree and then decided to do what he wanted to in film producing. What an amazing legacy Dad is leaving, and I know I don't have to go into much detail as to how many lives he has affected between his work as a scientist and inventor, as well as his work in Israel. He has truly helped millions of people. Dad's big loves of his life were my mom, who he loved incredibly and would do anything for. They were inseparable, and you'd rarely see one without the other. You would often see them dancing together when music was playing. Dancing and music were some of Dad's loves. I don't think that many people knew that Dad used to play saxophone as well as other wind instruments. He was a conductor of orchestra for musical comedies. His favorite musical was Kismet, followed by Man of La Mancha. I also remember when he would drive me around in the car as a kid. The radio was always turned on to classical music. Other dads had pop music, but now I share the love of classical music. Other loves were my brother and I and his grandchildren, and I think I can say his grand dogs and horses. Dad always had a calmness about him. Not only did he believe education was important to humans, but to animals as well. Oftentimes, when I would bring my dogs to our condo in Beaver Creek, you'd find Dad sitting with one of the dogs beside him, scratching behind their ears, and calmly talking to them about becoming an avalanche dog or a sled dog if they stayed in school and learned. Skiing was also one of the loves of Dad's life. He skied with grace as he lived his life gracefully. He was on ski patrol and a member of PSIA, which is Professional Ski Instructors of America. I think he may have taught many of you out there to ski. Ski trips were a huge memory to me with my family. For those of you that have arrived by plane, my dad would say, "Don't fly too high, it will melt the wax." This was referencing Icarus, a Greek myth about a guy who made wings out of wax and feathers. He flew too close to the sun and the wings melted, and he came crashing to earth. It's an allegory about being overly ambitious. A word to describe my dad. Dad was an avid art collector, and this was a huge love and part of his life. He'd carry one of the dogs around the condo and would show them the art on the wall and discuss the pieces of art to them, just like a human. Dad had such a calmness about him that the dogs would just look at him intently and appear to be listening. Other important values that Dad had taught me are calmness and patience, humor, modesty and being humble, generosity, resilience, and dedication. Dad didn't say a lot, but when he did, it usually was important. He also had a very dry sense of humor. He was soft-spoken, so if you were not paying attention, you could easily miss a brilliant comment or a joke. Dad had many other sayings. As we left school as kids, he'd tell us to study hard and learn a lot. Even as adults, he'd tell us that when we walk out the door. Shouting out the word of the day when losing balance while skiing would prevent you from falling. Of course, you had to get the word of the day from the head lift attendants. Words like sassafras and dandelion would help you from falling. Not unlike other Jewish families, food and meals were paramount. I remember as a kid that we would have all meals together at home, kind of unlike now. As we got older, we would often go out to eat, call our family foodies, but we would make reservations for dinner. As we got to the restaurant or to our destination, he would often say, "Lafayette, we are here." He'd look at the menu and say, "I'll have one of everything." Once food was placed in front of him, he'd say, "It looks so good, I don't want to eat it, I just want to look at it." When dessert was being served, he'd say, In for a penny, in for a pound. Sorry, I just lost my place. And I can resist anything but temptation. I'm sure many of you have heard all these. We'd fight over who would pay the bill, and he'd always try to pick up the tab before anyone else and would say, "Me, hunter-gatherer." And it's a tax deduction. He'd do anything to avoid taxes. Dad would not want to be a burden to anyone, and he would put everyone else ahead of himself, especially my mom. This showed the true love connection between them. Whatever Toby wants was another motto of his. When I was struggling with something that seemed important to me, he'd assure me that this too shall pass, and let it go, slip off like water on a duck's back. As my mom has not been feeling as well the past several years, Dad wanted to make one last trip to Israel. The trip had been postponed for several years for the C or COVID word. My parents and I finally had the chance to enjoy Boaz's JNF mission trip for major donors to see some of the work that they helped support in Israel. We had an amazing trip, and I think Dad was holding out for this. Dad was not one to complain and pretty much never said anything bad about others. I knew he was not feeling well when he complained of pain in Israel. He told me not to worry, it's a disc problem. Ultimately, we found out it was cancer that had spread to his bones. Mom and Dad's song was called More, that expressed his love for her. I think that this song also indicated his true love of life. Although he has passed, Dad still has more to contribute to life. He has passed on his ideas and patents to a company he has created just a week ago called Rocky Mountain Biphasic. I think you will be hearing more of Dad's legacy in the near future. One other parting quote of Dad was, "Where else can you have this much fun?" I love you, Dad. You're my hero. Thank you for teaching me so many important values. Fly high, but don't let the wax melt.
I want to invite his beloved sister, Susan.
Hi, everybody. It occurred to me a couple days ago that of all the people walking the earth, I am the one who has been acquainted with Mort the longest. So I've known him for 78 years, but who's counting? And I just want to recount a few pieces of family lore. And let me see. I'll start with Mort. My mother told us often about the time, I think it would have been 1939 or so, Mort contracted a case of polio. Luckily, she said it was a light case in that particular year. And so they took trips to the doctor, and Mort, I think, might have been 6, he could read. And he said to my mother, "What do those letters mean after the doctor's name, MD?" And she said to him, it means medical doctor. And he said to her, "That's what I'm going to be." So that was kind of his burning bush moment, like Moses. Okay, let's see. Oh, now I'll get on to me and how I happened to be born. My mother also thinks it was because of something Mort said. So I guess when he was about 10 years old, he came home one afternoon and he said there was a new baby, a little girl born to neighbors. And he said to my mother, "Gee, I wish we could be that lucky." So my mother, who had been waiting for years for things to get better economically, and they never did, but anyhow, she then said, well, she was feeling guilty, and she put in her order to Sears and Roebuck's, and I came. Okay. So then, I was about, 2.5, and I keep waiting for my big brother to come home from wherever he went and play with me, but he was gone for so long. And so I was lonely. And then I put in, my mother felt guilty again, and she put in another order to Sears and Roebuck, and that resulted in our younger brother, Bernie. So that's how the two younger ones came to be. Mort, he did play with me, he taught me. I guess I thought every little girl who had a big brother was treated so well. I wish they were. And he was a lot of fun, and Robin mentioned his sense of humor, and the classical music. So I like classical music. I like a sense of humor because Mort liked these things. Anyhow, but he helped me with anything I needed help with, which was a lot. I remember I might have been in junior high school, and we were having a test the next day on territories in the U.S. And there was a factoid. He kept asking me questions to prepare me for what might be on the test. And this is a question: where is the location of Guam? And that question stymied me like 3 times, and I'm having a meltdown. And he said, "Don't worry about it. Let's try a different approach so you could remember." And then he started to sing something, and with apologies to, might have remembered his name just before. He's very famous, but you'll tell me afterwards. He sings this song: "All day, all night, Mary Ann, sitting by the seaside, chewing Guam." So he was fun. He was such a lot of fun. And he taught me that I think fun is fundamental. And I've carried this earworm for, 60-some years in my head, that song. And it's why I will remember for the rest of my life that Guam is the southernmost of the Mariana Islands. So don't mess with me with that piece of information. Okay, when I was in college, he bought me a used Fiat so that I'd have a car to get around. He didn't have a lot of money, and he didn't pay a lot of money. And unfortunately, he didn't get a lot of car. It didn't go uphill, it didn't go downhill. It didn't want to go in bad weather, and Baltimore had plenty of bad weather. And every time it stopped or refused to go and wouldn't do what I wanted, and I'm stuck somewhere, who did I call? I always called Mort to figure out what's wrong with this car and get it going again. It was only years later that I learned that these phone calls, which I think were fairly frequent, messed up quite a few dates between Mort and Toby when they were courting. You know, the phone would ring and it's Susan in car trouble. So sorry about that, Toby. But it all worked out. Now, our dad died of colon cancer in his earlier 60s. And so my mother was working 6 days a week at the pizza and hot dog stand at one of the stores in Baltimore. And it was Mort's assignment as a college student to make sure that Bernie and I had dinner every night. So I thought my older brother was a gourmet, the most creative cook I'd ever seen. I was thrilled. For instance, who makes a meatloaf and stuffs it with horseradish? Like who? I thought, this is brilliant. This is so brilliant. I mean, this guy walked on water as far as I was concerned. The other day, while I was looking for something else, up popped a little teeny photograph. I wish all of you could see it. I'm going to give it to Mark. You show your kids. But this is Mort with our parents back in the 40s, and you can tell by this outfit, those are knickerbockers that he's wearing. And this was a typical American child of the 40s. How did he spend his time? He was collecting tin cans and medals for the war effort, and I think practicing his clarinet. So show these to your kids and let them make what they will over that outfit. But it was a happy moment. Our parents look so proud of this boy who has a nice semi-smile on his face. So that's all. He meant an awful lot to me. Everything he touched, I thought, was something to be saved. And I love you, Morton. I'll miss you. Thank you all.
I'd now like to invite his friend and partner in building Israel, Russell Robinson.
From Joe Carroll and Ronald Lauder, Randy and Jeff Levine, Lauren and Saul Lieserbrom, the board of directors and your whole family of Jewish National Fund, from Marcy and my family to the entire Mower family, we all pray and give you the spirit of strength for tomorrow and the future. Size doesn't matter. Now, I had to say that. Morton Mower was not a big man, but he was a giant human being. He was instrumental in keeping millions of people alive and their hearts beating. Yet I could tell you that he kept the Jewish people and Israel alive, strong and visionary. Now, he could calculate the DC circuitry and non-conductor electrons and capacitor and flow on inductors, but he also could see the future and the needs of our people, and he saw the pathways to success. Okay, I have to make a confession here. Mort, I never really understood about 5,000 volts of change capacitors and biophase and waveforms. Yet I loved listening for the hours and hours about your inventions and your technology. Mort was a unique leader. He never looked for recognition, always looked to help bring people along, always working on solutions. He never was scared of failing. He learned from failure, and he just start it again. Yet he told me once that his fear was life. I said, Mort, life? Your fear is life, not death? He looked at me and he said, yes. What happens if I waste a moment? And in that moment, I could have made a difference. And the future will suffer because I didn't do. I can't waste a moment of life. Mort, you never did. And I can guarantee you that the moments of your life was never wasted at Jewish National Fund. He was always running ahead. He always pushed us to places we didn't know we were going. And when things didn't go just right or we faced the challenges, he would say, where else can you have this much fun? In 1998, Israel was facing a water catastrophe, and Ronald Lauder and the Jewish National Fund announced that they were going to take on the challenge. Toby and Mort, they immediately signed up to help. So I met Mort. He told me about his background. And then he said, let's find a solution to this water crisis. And I thought, wow, a great scientist, an inventor. How lucky could we be? Mort, what do you know about water technology? I said, nothing. And he said, what do you know? I said, nothing. But I could tell you that from that moment to today, Morton Mower was the foremost expert of water technology and water solutions in the entire world. Where else can you have this much fun? In 2000, Toby and Mort invited me to their home in Baltimore. They were putting together a meeting of top people from Johns Hopkins University on technology and water. I was so excited because I was going to learn so much, and when I got there, Mort said, I'm going to be introducing you as the speaker. I said, Mort, I don't know enough to talk to this group. And Mort looked in my eyes and said, where else can you have this much fun? Mort worked every day and every night and developed the Lauder Water Solutions and the plan, which raised hundreds of millions of dollars, built 250 reservoirs, recycling centers, and made Israel the only nation in the world that faced a water catastrophe and turned it around. Toby and Morton Mower helped save Israel. In 2009, Mort and I were summoned to an investigation committee of the government of Israel on water. We went into this room. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was leading the investigation. There was an entire panel. I looked around. I said, Mort, maybe we should have brought our attorney. He said, I'll tell you what. I'll play the role as a doctor. You play the role as an attorney. Where else can you have this much fun? After that, Mort came up with the Mower peace plan. Yes, a peace plan. He was going to get ships to bring water from Turkey. They were going to provide water to the Palestinian Authority, to the Jordanians, that the Jewish National Fund would buy the ships, the Israeli government would guarantee the payments, that there would be a transport issue. Now, I have to tell you, I knew less about this than I knew about water. But so did Mort. But that didn't stop him. Now, the plan didn't work. But I will tell you that I have letters from the Palestinian Authority, from the Jordanian government, from the Turkish government, some saying continue on, some saying cease and desist. A secret meeting with the foreign minister of Turkey, who looked at me and made me promise no more correspondence about this whole issue. And when I called Mort, I said, Mort, I think we have a problem. He said, where else can you have this much fun? Never sought recognition, always finding results. 3 months ago, Toby, Mort, and I had dinner here in Denver. And what was the agenda? Russell, we have to work with Bob Lemke on the Med-Dead Canal. We're going to solve the issue of the Dead Sea. We're going to bring power to the Palestinian Authority, to the Jordanians. We're going to bring water. Mort never wasted a second. The last 2 years, Mort has been my personal consultant. We're working on the largest project we've ever done, a project called the World Zionist Village in Beersheba. He read hundreds of studies. He dissected them and put them together and gave me answers, and we had conversations over and over. He rewrote the plan, I know you will believe this, 19 times. And that was only because I quit sending it to him after that. 19 times. Every word, 29 pages, single-spaced. Whenever I was feeling overwhelmed, whenever I thought it was just too big, whenever I thought that, I don't know if we could really do this, I called Mort. And he said, you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice to say you can't do it. What will our children and our grandchildren say? Don't waste another second, Russell, on ever thinking you can't do it. Just make it happen. Mort, biyachad, together, we'll make it happen. 3 weeks ago, Marcy and I were able to travel, Toby and Mort, to Israel. We were at Nefesh B'Nefesh when they dedicated the Mower Pavilion. Now, he was in some pain, but I could tell you, with film, he danced, and he sang to Toby at Timna National Park. He dedicated the Toby Mower Community Center. He spoke at the dedication of his pavilion about his dreams for the Jewish people, for Israel. We cried, we laughed, we had some tough conversations. But at the pavilion, in the balcony, overlooking Yerushalayim, I turned to Mort. I said, "You've done good." He said, "It's not over." Where else can you have this much fun?
What an honor it is to be able to speak words about Morton Mower, Mordechai, Ben Raphael, and Perila. We're comforted in knowing that Mort left this world in the same way he lived his life. He was never one to waste time. He didn't have a long, drawn-out illness that robbed him of his dignity or wisdom. And even the day before he passed, he was arranging his affairs, which were vast and complex. He was having conversations with his loved ones, saying to them all that he had wanted to say, and letting them share with him how much they loved and respected him. He told his children, "I think it's time that I need to say goodbye. I'm happy, I'm satisfied, and I'm at peace." He passed away the next morning. Only someone very in tune with their body and soul knows when they will leave this world. He had a sense of humor about it. I'd call him up and I'd say, "How are you feeling, Mort?" And he'd say, "Well, have you ever read the book of Job?" For those who don't know, that's the book in the Bible about a person who suffers and suffers and suffers. He knew he was sick longer than anyone. He wasn't a complainer, and he was able to cope with the pain for a while before having to admit what he was going through. Why did Mort keep it to himself? The simple answer is that Mort and Toby and their family had planned one last trip together to Israel. They would tour and celebrate the projects that they had made possible, as you heard. Mort wanted that trip so bad with Toby. Nothing was going to stop him from going. I was talking to them months before the trip, and that's what they were looking forward to. And before that, they got to look forward to a bar mitzvah. That's what pushed him onwards. When I spoke to Mort after the trip, he triumphantly said, "I did it. We made it to Israel. Toby got to cut all the ribbons. It was a wonderful trip." That was his success. Toby, you were the center of Mort's life. He always wanted to make you happy. You said he spoiled you, but in doing so, he was actually making himself happy. From the time you got angry at him because he bossed you around, and then he reported you to your boss when you were a lab tech, he had told her to deal with some kind of specimens, and she said to him, "I'm busy, go do it yourself." And then when you were a nurse, and you saw him in the hall, and you stuck out your leg and tripped him, and you insisted on calling him Morty instead of Dr. Mower. And then you saw him sitting alone, and you left your friends to go sit next to him. And he took you out for coffee, and it was besheret. Matching souls like matching puzzle pieces. Now, that doesn't mean that you never fought. Sure, you'd argue, but you both always knew that you were the only one for him, and he was the only one for you. He understood you, and you'd always find your way back into each other's arms. Mort always asked the question that every husband should ask: what can I do to make my wife happy? And you two were always together. In my mind, it's Mort and Toby. In my phone, it's Mort and Toby. And what a life you had together. A treasury of memories, travels around the world, skiing in Beaver Creek. You taught him how to dance, and you both were wonderful to watch on the dance floor. For Mort, working and doing science was fun. So luckily he had Toby, who brought a wide range of fun and social activities into his life. And these past few years of COVID, I picture the two of you sitting in the courtyard of One Polo Creek with your friends and all the dogs running around, and sitting together enjoying the sun and the fresh air, and it was enough. You were blessed with children who brought you joy. Mark and Kathleen and Robin are so accomplished and smart, just like their parents. Mason, Luca, and Zeke will continue to make Mort and Toby proud. And I know that one day, not too long from now, there will be a new baby who will carry on Mort's name in your family. Now, he's only 13, so let's give him some time. When Mark and Kathleen got married, they decided that they were going to have children right away because their hope was that Mort and Toby would be there to see their bar mitzvahs. Well, as I mentioned, this past December, Mort and Toby got to be present at the bar mitzvah of their first grandson. Mason wrote a letter that I'm going to read on his behalf and on behalf of Mark. Hello and good morning, everyone. I know we are all saddened by the loss of Morton Mower, who I know as Poppy, but today we should celebrate his life. He did amazing work and he saved many lives. He was a role model to me, and he was one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. Even when there was conflict, he was nice to me and my brothers, and he didn't want us to be involved. There's a great quote by Lucius Seneca, who was a Roman philosopher. Not how long, but how well you have lived is the main thing. And I think we can all agree that he lived an amazing life. Thank you, and rest in peace, Poppy. Mason. You grew up in Pikesville, Maryland, a happy Jewish childhood, But you had a special father who was famous. You were proud of him. He was a hero to you. And it's a lot of pressure to walk in a great man's footsteps. But you both followed strongly and made him proud. When you were little, you remember how he had all these old medical devices in his basement, and he'd open them up with you and patchki with them and connect this cord to this wire. And he'd explain to you how they worked, including the electrical engineering, and he'd try to get them to do something more, something new and better. So you saw the same ingenuity firsthand that he used to invent his greatest gift to mankind, the implantable defibrillator. In the cab drive here from the Denver airport, I was talking to the driver, who's an immigrant from Pakistan. When I told him about Mort, he said, "Then that man saved my father's life." A couple times in every generation, humanity is blessed with a mind that's curious and unrelenting in its search to uncover new knowledge. Mort was that natural scientist, and he lived up to the incredible potential he was born with. Launching the defibrillator and the field of cardiac resynchronization therapy. When he started working on these fields, there were many people who said he was nuts. They said he was crazy and it would never work. Thank God, one of Mort's central traits was stubbornness and resilience. He never gave up. What was the line? How fun is it? Where else can you have this much fun? I remember him saying that. I'd call him up and ask what he was up to, like socially. He'd say, "I'm incredibly busy with my research." He was at work every day in his office. He never slowed down. He had strong opinions. When he believed in something, he stuck to his guns. He had strong political opinions that I'm sure not everyone agreed with. But everyone could agree that Mort's passion was always driven by his love for America and his incredible love and devotion to Israel. He loved Israel with his heart and his soul. One of his last requests was that his art collection should find its home somewhere in Israel. His devotion to Israel could be traced back possibly to his childhood in Frederick, when he faced a lot of anti-Semitism and was beaten up just for being a Jew. He was proud that there was a country that Jews stood up for themselves, that was a shelter. But I think more directly, his connection to Israel was from Toby. Toby needed something to do in Baltimore. She was bored, so she got involved in the JNF. And the wonderful people there, Diane, Boaz, and Russell, and so many others, guided her to leadership. And when you guide Toby to leadership, you also get Mort as a leader. And they're the reason why I value the JNF and why I'm a rabbi for JNF. Besides JNF, they also were major contributors to Ben-Gurion University in the Negev and many other causes, including the House of Hope and the Tova House in Baltimore, helping those trying to overcome their drug addictions. He was a proud and devoted Jew. I remember when he would sit in shul, he'd always sit on his own. He wasn't a schmoozer in shul. And he'd sit there and he'd close his eyes and he'd really meditate. He was very calm and even-keeled in everything he did, and I think there was a deep spirituality underneath that. He didn't talk about it, but I know he was a very spiritual person. He was funny. His stupid magic tricks that he'd always do, talking to the dogs and showing them art. He liked a good joke, and he always had a funny quip, something dry to say that would make you laugh. His niece, Randy, remembers back when they were kids at the Pesach Seder, they would have to negotiating with a terrorist to get the afikomen back from Mort. He was really rough. It went on, and finally he'd give in, and he'd buy back the afikomen with all kinds of prizes and gifts. Mort was modest. He was quiet, but whatever he said was meaningful. Honest, down to earth, and approachable. He treated everyone equally, with kindness and respect. He didn't consider himself too important to waste his time on others. He explained his sheep heart research to me on numerous occasions. He counseled entrepreneurs as they started out. When his great niece Avery had a school project to present on a famous inventor, she chose Mort, and he spoke to her on the phone for well over an hour, helping her on that project and understanding the science. Though he was the answer to a question on Jeopardy, it never went to his head. Now, at funeral homes, I know in Baltimore they have a casket room. Someone of Mort's stature could have had the Cadillac of caskets. That's there, they have that. Instead, he's like everyone else. A plain, simple coffin, traditional, modest. You could say it was his modesty, but he'd probably say, "What does it matter? I'm dead." He just wasn't a selfish person. He always put others first. My children got to grow up with him at our house for Shabbos meals, Rosh Hashanah, and Pesach meals when they lived in Baltimore, and they were angry at them when they moved away. At my shul, they helped me fund a program that I've started over the last 9 years. It's called the Rabbinic Residency Program, where we take new rabbis right out of smicha and give them a 3-year residency at our shul, an easy place to get started. I flew out to Denver and asked Mort and Toby for help, and they responded. And we have that program today with our 3rd rabbinic resident being sent out into the world to help the Jewish community. That's because of them. Toby, I told you last night that you are very strong, and you said, "That's what everybody thinks." And you've said that to me before. But Toby, you are very strong. You are very great. You are always there for Mort and with Mort, driving him forward with admiration and encouragement. We all love you and will be here for you as you take your time to figure out how to continue on your important mission in this life. And I know that Mort will always be with you, tied to your heart and soul. Nothing will make him happier than to see you smiling once again and remaining devoted to the causes that you both spent your life pursuing. 89 years old, but I think he seemed much younger to everyone who knew him. A congregant called me and left a message on my phone. He was one heck of a nice guy, brilliant, philanthropic, friendly. He taught his children the value of education, curiosity, patience, resilience, generosity, and philanthropy. I'm sad, but I'm not sad for Mort. He did live each moment of his life properly. I'm sad for us. He would have kept on doing his research until he was 120. He will have a hero's welcome in heaven. One who saves a life is as if they've saved an entire world, we're told. How many people are going to be waiting for him in heaven to thank him? Mort, We promise to always love you, respect you, and remember you. You'll be with us as we live our lives. You're a blessing to your communities, a blessing to Israel, a blessing to this country. And so now we bless you. May you rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. To honor him with concluding words, his friend and Rabbi Steve Foster.
Eloheinu v'Elohei our God and God of all generations. Thou governest all things with infinite wisdom and mercy, and who guidest the destinies of all of humankind. As a parent have you loved us and showered your blessings upon us. Therefore we shall not murmur even when sorrow befalls us, but with humility and unfaltering trust we shall accept your decrees. In joy and in sorrow alike we praise your goodness and acknowledge your justice. We remember that we are but strangers upon earth. Like a shadow, our life flees away. Help us, O God, so to walk in your sight, that when the few years of our earthly pilgrimage are ended, we may be ready to meet our end with tranquil mind. To thee we look for comfort and strength when one of our beloved is taken from us and a link is broken in the chain of love which binds us together. Though we walk in the valley of the shadow of death, we shall fear no evil, for thou art with us. Be praised, O eternal our God, in all your dispensations, and sanctified be your name, now and forevermore. And let us all say together, Amen. Beloved family, dear friends, I know that when Rabbi Shapiro said there's another rabbi to speak, I looked around and everybody was going like this. I promise it'll just be a few minutes, and I am grateful for this beautiful moment that we've all been able to share together, and I feel a real sense of humility to be a part of this service in which we honor a person who really was truly bigger than life. Yes, he lived 89 years, we understand that. And all of the things that have been said so beautifully were about his biography. I am not a biographer. And I really want to say to you that I have only one thing that I want to share with you, especially to you as family. I believe that we have tasks before us, and you as a family especially. And I believe that there are 4 tasks. I say this all the time, but I believe it. And so this is no biography. It's a challenge. First task, you have to grieve. You have to grieve for your loss. For a loss of somebody who has done so much for so many. And not just his science and not just his generosity, but his personhood, who he was as a human being. I believe this with all my heart and soul. It's not about the words of biography. It's not about what he did. He did what he did because he was the kind of person that he was. It's not the other way around. And so we're all here today. Yes, because our task is to grieve. And part of the way we grieve as a community is to look at somebody's life and say, maybe I can be a better person because of him. Or sometimes because of her. That's our task. Second task is to wonder. Yes, at the miracle of birth, a wonderful thing that we are blessed with, and the mystery of death. This is a time of bittersweetness. Bitterness because he's gone, but sweetness because he didn't have to suffer more than he already did. and that prolonged illness which it could have been. He was spared that. Thank God. And so this is a time of bittersweetness. And we think about the fact, what's going to happen? Rabbi Shapiro talked about heaven. And some of us are sitting around saying, is there one? Is there not one? Who knows? I don't know. And I'm not anxious to find out about it either. But the truth is that our task is to understand the mystery of this world in which we live and whatever it is that might lie beyond this world. Because if we live by what we believe, and he did, if we live by what we believe, then we will have been successful in the years that God gives to us, no matter what happens to us when we're gone. Third task for all of us is to remember who he was in his greatest moments of living. And the fact that he even wanted to continue on, even the weeks before he died. He never stopped working, never stopped living. And all of us who remember him for those privileged moments, we have to remember those moments. I want to share one brief moment with you that I had with him. A number of years ago, the JNF conference was in New York. And I don't know whether it was you, Diane, who called me, or it wasn't you, Russell. I know that. Russell was too big. No, I'm just kidding. Somebody called me and said, we're going to be in New York, and there's a program late Saturday afternoon, and you're going to be at that program. And when the program is over, would you be willing to lead us in Havdalah? Well, why would I say no? And where was Havdalah? Carnegie Hall. I even had a member of our congregation in Denver who heard that I was going to do the Havdalah. He said, I'm going to the conference. And when it was all over, Mort came up to me and he said, you made it to Carnegie Hall. Not many people do that. But that was his sense of humor. And it was a moment that I cherish. So we have to remember those moments that we had with him and how those moments made our lives better. And lastly, and I believe that this is the purpose for our being here today, our last task is to emulate who he was. Oh, we're not all going to be the inventors. We're not all going to have the wherewithal to give like Toby and Mort did give. But I learned yesterday he came from a very poor family. And he learned the art of giving because of his mother. And you said to me when he was very young, no matter who it was that needed a penny, his mother would give them a penny. And he never forgot that. And if you and I, dear friends, can emulate the wonderful way in which he tried to live in his highest moments of living, then we will have given him that sense of immortality that is our task. And so I do hope and I do pray that each of us will recognize this moment as a moment of joy because we knew him, and a moment of sorrow because he's gone. It is in that spirit, and I believe that this poem from a wonderful poet will be helpful at this particular time. The poet wrote, if I can find it here, I may be able to and I may not be able to. Poet wrote, when I die, if you need to weep, cry for someone walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around others and give them what you need to give me. You can love me most by sharing your joys and multiplying your good deeds. You can love me most by letting me live in your eyes and not in your mind. And when you say Kaddish for me, remember what our tradition teaches. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. I believe Mort would ask that of us, to give that love away to others in days to come. And now, dear friends, may I ask you all please to rise for the traditional memorial prayer.
Of course. Wow, Toby would like to say something, so I'm very... All right.
We were in California quite a few years ago. You all hear me?
Yeah.
We were in California quite a few years ago to be with someone that's being honored. There's a colleague of my husband's, and he was talking about Morty as part of his talk. And after he talked about Mort, a young man, about 9 years old, came over to Morty and said, "I want to thank you." And Mort said, "What for? You saved my life."
Oh,
So it wasn't only older people that he saved, it was young people too.
incredible. I was going to say that in this prayer, the El Maleh, you'll hear Mort's Hebrew name. And I love names because even though we don't give ourselves our name, they often represent who we are. And his name was Mordechai ben Raphael, Veperla. So you know, a pearl, only one grows inside that. And he was one of a kind, that's for sure. And Raphael, his father, Raphael is the angel of healing. And Mordechai saved the Jewish people. So I think his name was pretty perfect. El Maleh Rachamim Shochen Bameromim Hametzei Menucha nechonai Tachat Kanefei Ashechina B'mahalot Kedoshim Udiorim Kezar Harakia Mazehirim Et Nishmat Mordechai Ben Raphael Veperla Shehalach Leolamo Began Eden, oy began Eden, Tehei menuchato ana Baal horachamim, Hastirehu beseiter kinafecha, Leolamim utzeror Bitzeror achayim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen.
O God, full of compassion, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence unto Dr. Morton Mower, who has entered into eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be thou his possession, and may his repose ever be peace. and let us say together, Amen.
On the sheets that you were given, it lists the times for visitation at Toby and Mort's home in Cherry Creek. There'll be a service today at 3 o'clock following the internment, a mincha service where the family will have a chance to say Kaddish. We'll also be saying Kaddish at the cemetery. Thank you so much for being here.
Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to the Shiva information in those booklets are escorted procession instructions. We do have an escorted procession to Mount Nebo Memorial Park today if you'd like to join us for the interment. If I could just remind you to turn on your headlights, turn on your hazards, and watch out for outside traffic if you are joining us. But again, more instructions are on that sheet. We are going to be using this exit right out here of the cemetery parking lot, right onto Monaco. So if you're not going to the cemetery, we can ask you to maybe hang back a little bit, allow those who are lining up for the procession, give them a little bit of preference and priority. There's another exit by going to the east if you'd like to get out right away. We will ask you to please remain in your places as we escort the family and the casket out. At this time, if I can invite the pallbearers forward. So with that being said, if you happen to run into the family using the restroom or in the hallway, please allow them the opportunity to conclude what they need to do because they do need to get to the cemetery. So try not to give them your condolences at that time.